Charles Martel was one of the most important figures in the European Middle Ages. His achievements included laying the foundation of the Carolingian dynasty, establishing the fiefdom system, and consolidating and developing the feudal social system at that time. The Carolingian family, which was born as a mayor of the palace, also originated from the Frankish tribe of the Germanic people in central France today. In a chaotic world, ability is the magic weapon to get ahead. Pepin overthrew the old king and appointed himself as the new king. At this time, the border of the Roman Empire was invaded by the Lombards, a Germanic barbarian country. The Pope had no choice but to come up with a mutually beneficial plan. He asked Pepin to join the army of the Roman Empire to attack the Lombards. If the Lombards were successfully eliminated and the battle was won, the Pope would publicly crown King Pepin and make him the king of the secular world. After Pepin III gained power, he sent his brothers and the last Merovingian king of the Frankish Kingdom to the monastery, allowing them to live a quiet and inactive life. In 751 AD, he was anointed and ascended the throne according to the ceremony in the Old Testament to become the new generation of Frankish king. 3 years later, Pope Stephen III anointed his brilliant achievements. In return for the Pope's support, in 754 AD, Pepin gave Ravenna to the Pope, and the Pope fully established the Carolingian family as the king of the Frankish Kingdom. Starting in 755 AD, the Pope asked Pepin to fulfill his promise to sweep away the Arian Lombards and completely eliminate the potential threat of the Catholic Church. Pepin lived up to expectations. He not only won a great victory and eliminated Lombardy, but also gave the Pope a vital part of the occupied territory. This expensive pledge of allegiance established a safe and buffering protection circle around the city of Rome, making it difficult for future enemies to invade. This is the famous Pepin donation in history. Pepin has since become a military protectorate of the Papal States. In 768 AD, Pepin passed away, but he left a politically and economically prosperous kingdom for his sons Charlemagne and Carloman. The Pope traditionally only served as a religious leader and had no real sphere of influence. Pepin's dedication gave the Catholic Church a large area of land to manage, and the Church spent a lot of time managing the army, subjects, finance, government operations, and other political affairs. The kings of other barbarian countries in Europe saw the precedent set by Pepin, which invisibly formed a widespread new understanding throughout Europe, that is, as long as the king can be crowned by the Pope, no matter what his origin, even if he was a commoner who became a king, he would have the recognition of the Church from then on and become a legitimate king. At the same time, he would convince the people in the conquered areas and have the power to command the territory and the life and death of the people. The Pope also complimented the king with the blessing of the king, and his status was further consolidated, becoming a pope with a higher status. Charlemagne, who succeeded his father, was the most famous king in Frankish history. He was the king of hearts and playing cards. Charlemagne's younger brother died in 771, making Charles the only ruler of the kingdom. Charles was still bound by the treaty between his father and the Pope, and he continued to fight the Lombards because the Lombards did not recognize the treaty. In 774 AD, he conquered the entire Lombard kingdom with his bravery. At the same time, he supported the Catholic Church's missionary work to the east. Until 785, his war with the Saxons determined his politics. In 785, Duke Eugen of Saxony surrendered to Charles, but the war between the two sides continued until 804. The continuous wars promoted the feudalization of the Frankish kingdom, and the number of peasants under feudal rule increased greatly. The power of feudal rulers, especially kings and dukes, increased greatly. The power of the Church was also consolidated. In order to consolidate the power of the country, Charles established a series of border areas on the border, which were the country's defense buffer zone and offensive assembly area. These border areas were granted to privileged counts, and in fact these border areas were outside the kingdom's territory, not part of the kingdom. He settled in these areas, let peasants go there to guard these areas, and built castles there. Particularly important border regions were Carinthia and the border regions to the north, which later formed Austria. This is also the origin of the densely populated castles we see on our European travels. In 793 AD, Charles reformed the internal management of the kingdom and further consolidated internal rule. The king's direct administrative agencies were the royal palace, the royal court, and the chancellery. In the kingdom, the counts managed the king's property. The king issued orders to the counts and decided disputes between the counts through his messengers. Aachen became the emperor's palace and the center of the Frankish Kingdom under Charles's rule. On December 25, 800 AD, Charles's status was no longer enough to express his rights as a king, and he was crowned Emperor of the Romans in Rome, which was the pinnacle of his power and the most glorious moment of the Carolingian dynasty in the Frankish Kingdom. Charles's rule over the kingdom lasted 46 years, and the Frankish Kingdom reached its largest scale during his reign. The area of the Frankish Kingdom in 814 AD was estimated to be 1,200,000 square kilometers. The Frankish Kingdom during this period spanned today's France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, the Low Countries of the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg, and northern Italy. Charlemagne's rule not only expanded the territory of the Frankish Kingdom, but also strengthened the cultural and military influence of Central and Western Europe. Charlemagne died in 814. In his will, Charles stipulated that the empire be divided among his three sons, Pepin, Louis, and Charles the Younger. But since Pepin and Charles the Younger died in 810 and 811, this plan of three divisions was invalid. Louis was promoted to vice-emperor in 813 and succeeded his father to the throne in 814. The population of the empire reached an unprecedented 12.5 million in that year. Although Charles had stipulated in 806 that the Frankish kingdom would be divided among his sons, according to the Germanic tradition after his death, Louis saw the damage caused by this tradition to the division of the empire and decided to keep the empire united regardless of his father's plan. In 817 AD, he issued a decree to prevent the division of the empire on the grounds that the title of emperor was indivisible, and he designated his son Lothar as vice-emperor. His decree clearly stipulated that the emperor's eldest son would inherit the throne. Louis's decision was supported by the church, which believed that the unification of the empire was the same as the unification of the church. If this provision were implemented, Europe today would likely become a unified country like China. However, his ideal was not realized. The perspective caused by this policy would directly intervene in the quagmire of political contradictions. Although the church and the royal power had achieved a high degree of unity, the church and the emperor's sons became new opponents. There was only one eldest son, but there were many more second sons. Each second son was either a king or a powerful person who controlled a large area of land. They united for a common purpose, and the energy released was difficult for the church and even the royal power to resist. Starting in 829 AD, armed conflict finally broke out between the emperor and his sons. In a palace coup in the early 830s, Louis was detained by his sons, and from then on he lost his real power and became a high-ranking emperor who did not have to worry about anything. His sons became independent individuals in their respective territories, and Louis became an old emperor in name only. 3 years after Louis's death, his sons, Lothair I, Charles the Younger, and Louis the Younger, divided the empire into 3 parts in the Treaty of Verdun in 843, ending the Frankish Empire. Europe has since embarked on a path of division and has never been reunited for 1,200 years. In 855 AD, Lothair divided his Middle Frankish kingdom among his sons in the partition of Pruem. After the death of Lothair's sons, Charles the Bald and Louis the German divided the Middle Frankish kingdom in the Treaty of Meersen in 870. In the end, West Francia and East Francia divided Lotharingia and Provence, while Italy continued to maintain the status quo. Charles the Bald tried to occupy the entire Middle Frankish kingdom, but failed. Louis III obtained the western part of the Middle Frankish kingdom in the Treaty of Riedmont, and the division of the Frankish Empire was roughly formed. The boundary between the East and the West hardly changed throughout the Middle Ages. King Louis III of the West Frankish Kingdom died in 882, Carloman died in 884, and Charles III of the East Frankish Kingdom was still regarded as the emperor of the entire empire in 888. This relationship continued until the 20th century AD, when France and Germany still regarded each other as legacy rivals. The inheritance system of the Frankish Kingdom, especially the divided inheritance during the Merovingian and Carolingian dynasties, had a long-term impact on the political landscape of Europe. This divided inheritance system led to the dispersion of power and made it difficult to achieve centralization, which to a certain extent explains why today's Europe has not formed a centralized empire like China. Of course, whether centralization is beneficial to the development of civilization, you can also leave a message to express your views. In history, the divided inheritance system of the Frankish Kingdom led to the continuous division and reorganization of territory, and this model was reflected in a large number of later European history. The division of the Carolingian dynasty eventually led to the formation of modern countries such as France, Germany, and Italy. In addition, the feudal system in medieval Europe also strengthened the independence of local power, further hindering the development of centralization. In modern times, the French Revolution and Napoleon's rule strengthened centralization, but this centralization was not achieved throughout Europe. On the contrary, Europe's political structure tended to be more inclined towards national sovereignty and the formation of nation-states, which was in sharp contrast to the inheritance system of the ancient Frankish Kingdom. Therefore, it can be said that the inheritance system of the Frankish Kingdom and its long-term impact on the political structure of Europe are a factor in the lack of a centralized empire in Europe today. But this is only one of many influencing factors. The political structure of modern Europe is also affected by other historical, cultural, economic, and geographical factors. The successor states that split off from the disintegration of the Frankish Kingdom continue to play a role in European history. The three countries that split off when the Frankish Kingdom perished, the western part has evolved into today's France after many years, the eastern part has evolved into today's Germany and Austria, and the central part has split twice into northern Italy, Switzerland and the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg. These countries evolved from the Franks are still among the most developed economies in the world. The migration and development process of the Franks is not only a geographical expansion, but also an evolution of culture, social structure, and political system. They became a powerful country in the kingdom established by the Germanic tribal peoples that eventually converted to the Catholic Church and survived and developed. Its history had a profound impact on the Middle Ages in Europe. The rise and development of the Frankish Kingdom laid the foundation for the later formation of the European feudal system and multi-ethnic countries. The establishment and inheritance of the Frankish Kingdom is a historical narrative spanning several centuries, involving the rise and fall and alternation of multiple dynasties. The rule of the Carolingian family began to decline in the late 9th century and was eventually replaced by the Capetian dynasty in 987. Hugh Capet became the first Capetian king of the Kingdom of France. The rule of the Capetian family marked the official establishment of the Kingdom of France and lasted for nearly 300 years. The direct male descendants of the Capetian dynasty died out in 1328, and the throne was passed to the Valois dynasty, a branch of the Capetian dynasty that inherited the female bloodline. During the reign of the Valois family, due to the issue of succession, Britain and France experienced a century of war and internal turmoil. Henry III, the last king of the House of Valois, died childless in 1589, and the throne was passed to the Bourbon dynasty. Henry IV of the Bourbon family became the King of France. He ended the French War of Religion by issuing the Edict of Nantes, bringing a brief peace to France. The Bourbon family brought France to the position of the world's first power. The large number of magnificent buildings and artworks we see in Paris mostly come from this period. Louis XIV was called the Sun King. The rule of the Bourbon family was interrupted by the French Revolution and the Napoleonic period, but it was briefly restored between 1814 and 1830. Members of the Bourbon family established dynasties not only in France, but also in Spain, Naples, and Sicily, becoming a transnational royal family. The history of the Frankish Kingdom and its subsequent dynasties is very exciting. The change of each dynasty was accompanied by complex political struggles and social changes. These historical events together shaped the predecessor of modern France. Clovis I, as the ancestor of this thousand-year-long royal inheritance, has a great influence. Although these dynasties changed, they all originated from the Frankish Kingdom established by Clovis, and their rule left a deep mark on French history. Let's introduce the language evolution of the Frankish Kingdom. The early Frankish Kingdom spoke Frankish, a West Germanic language used by the Franks from the 5th to the 9th century. Frankish gradually evolved into Low Frankish, Old Dutch, and High Frankish. By the 9th century, these languages had merged with other West Germanic languages to form Old High German, and had an impact on Old French, becoming an upper-class language. The writing of the Frankish Kingdom is Merovingian, a version of the Latin alphabet used during the Merovingian dynasty, mainly used in the monasteries of Luxembourg, Louvain, Corbie, and Scherer from the 7th to the 10th century. Each monastery has its own version of the Merovingian font, which developed from the official script and is similar to the semi-official script and the island script. Over time, the Frankish language has influenced modern French, German, and Dutch. For example, many modern French words and place names, including the country name France, have Frankish, i.e. Germanic, origins. France is still called the Frankish Kingdom in some languages. In addition, Frankish is called Old Dutch in northeastern France, today's Belgium and the Netherlands, while Frankish in the Rhineland was influenced by the Elborg Germanic dialect and participated in the Second Germanic sound change, forming the modern Central Franconia and Rhine Franconian dialects, which are part of modern German and Luxembourgish. Dear friends, in a short time, we have moved forward with the wheel of history and walked side by side through those moments where history stayed. It allows us to truly experience what is truly calm and makes us more upright and strong. Compared with any waves in history, what we are experiencing today is just like a small dust falling into the Milky Way. Has our world today become more civilized because of the changes of time? How far is peace from us? This is the sincere hope of every kind person. This is the content of our historical exploration in this issue. In the next video, we will introduce you to more exciting stories of the ups and downs of the subsequent dynasties of the Frankish Kingdom. Thank you for watching and accompanying me. I am your time travel navigator, Stardust. By learning from people, we can understand gains and losses. By learning from history, we can understand the rise and fall. Let us understand the distant past and foresee a bright future. See you next time.